If you're a small business and you're struggling with finding enough time to run your business and live your life, stay with me because I'm going to show you the full small business leadership system that will get you more time, more profit, and more peace of mind, something all of us business owners love to have. I'm going to start you off with an analogy today. So we're going to think about having a car and we're driving our car, we're going down the highway, car starts to shake and you're like, okay, car's shaking, you take it in and it turns out that the tires are a bit worn or worn enough to make the car wiggle and wobble. So you buy 4 new tires. Cool. You've solved the problem. You're back to driving. A few weeks later, you notice your car is kind of starting to pull to the right a little bit. And so you're like, okay, well, I'm going to take that in, get that sorted. Suddenly you're noticing, maybe a couple weeks later, the brakes are maybe acting up a little weirdly. And then eventually a wheel bearing goes and you're like, man, like that's a lot of things to happen to my car, because what turns out is the alignment was actually off. So every visit that you had prior to discovering the alignment being off meant that someone's giving you a part and an invoice, and every visit it's that different part. But because that alignment is off, that's actually what has been causing all of these issues in your car. But now you have 4 invoices, 4 new parts, but reality, a lot of those things could have been prevented if we had discovered what the core problem was with your vehicle. If you own a small business and you find that you are just fixing bits and parts and pieces, maybe you've been buying spare parts for a while now. I am going to get into that today. So some of the symptoms we're looking for if we're like, okay, am I having the same kind of issues as misalignment? If you have lots of questions from your team, if you're delegating, it doesn't really stick the way you want it to, if you see 2 people doing the same job, but maybe they're doing it differently, big symptom here, you can't get enough time to actually work on your business the way that you would like to. Maybe you've hired more, but for some reason, the workload doesn't seem to get any lighter. You're going to do some things to try to mitigate that because the work's still kind of getting done. You're finding some of those decisions, some of those standards are still coming to you. And you definitely are the hero when things are starting to slide a bit sideways. You're swooping in and you're saving the day from the team when things get a little bit tough. Lots of times what we do as business owners then is we're starting to be like, okay, well, I'm going to hire better people. So maybe that's something that you do. Maybe you're bought a new piece of software. You're like, okay, this software, it's going to solve all my problems. The sales guy said it's going to solve my problems. So this is going to be great. Maybe you read another leadership book. You have a stack of those on your nightstand or on your bookcase, some of them gathering dust. Maybe you made it through a chapter or 2, but you pick up a new one because you think this is going to be the one. Maybe you're doing things like writing SOPs and that sort of thing that end up getting shelved and they gather a little bit of dust, whether digitally or actually in a binder on the shelf. A lot of these things can help for a brief period of time, but then you're finding that a few weeks later, that friction that you were feeling before, it just keeps showing up and might be coming back in different ways. But in reality, what you've done is you've just made a few more repairs and now you have a few more invoices to pay, just like with the car analogy. In reality, your business has 3 parts when we're looking at it from a leadership lens. That is leadership, team, and systems. A lot of times as owners, we work on these one at a time, and that really is the equivalent of replacing tires or changing a spark plug or whatever car thing that we can make a relation to. These things are real repairs. So obviously we're fixing things as we go. That's great. It feels good. But what's happening is we're still seeing the wear, despite the fact that we are fixing some of these smaller things along the way. These are some patterns that you're going to see if this is what you're doing. If you are fixing systems without changing how you lead, and maybe what ends up happening there is you start building or using tools that nobody's using. If you are working with your team, but you're not implementing systems or connecting those 2 things together, you get really good at people improvising, sweeping in and saving the day. If you are working on yourself, so you've read those leadership books, you're doing the cool leadership stuff, but you're not really working within your teams and your systems, then you become a better leader, but the same overloaded business is going to keep going. That's still going to be something that happens for you as you continue on. So it feels like you're fixing all of these things, but we're not quite looking at it in a way that is going to truly solve the problem. So in this video, I am going to show you the whole system. I'm going to show you the 3 parts, and more importantly, how those parts connect together. And by the end, you're going to know which connection is maybe causing you friction in your business, maybe something that you can be working on to make some of these deeper corrections that are going to serve you for a much longer amount of time. So a quick thing before I get into that, I am Chris, leadership strategist. I have 20 years of B2B business ownership, and I have helped businesses just like yours build systems and teams and selves that create way more time and profit in businesses. It's my favorite thing to do. If you are working on the same things, I would invite you to join my free community, High Return Leadership on School, where we work on these things and others. And actually, everything that I teach is based on what we're going to be going over today. So this is a great flagship video to get you introduced to what we're going to be working on. So let's do some drawing. Forgive my writing. I'm just going to start with that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at your whole business from this perspective. So we have, first of all, we have you. You are the business owner. You are the leader. We have your team. We have your systems, right? So we have these 3 things. What happens is these are all actually connected together. What I find that people miss is that the most important pieces actually don't sit within the systems and the team. Obviously, those pieces are important, but the more important parts are the connections in between these circles. This is where our alignment comes from. And this is where we can work within to make our business easier, make it run smoother, make it run better, faster, more profitably with more time for you. Lots of times as owners, we're hunting for time and tasks. So you're kind of thinking about like, oh, look at all these little things in here that we can be fixing. I fixed this one. I have fixed this one, and I have fixed this one, for example. So that feels good. That feels like, yes, we are getting stuff done. We're improving things. It's going to be great. But really what happens then is these little things we're fixing, they might save us 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a week, 20 minutes, that sort of thing. So we're getting back a few minutes, but it's not actually solving the larger, more valuable constraints that will actually get us more time and lighten the load on us so that we can run our businesses. Every single thing that you touch in your business, whether it is like one of these small things or not, that takes your time. So we just need to really be aware of that. What we want to do is look outside of these single circles, because looking at one of them is just like, oh, this is the same as getting a new set of tires. This is the same as fixing XYZ, whatever car thing we might be fixing. What we really want to be doing here is strengthening the connections in between these circles. And I can give you an example. So let's say that your team comes to you consistently when there is some non-standard pricing that they have to ask you about. Maybe this happens 4 or 5 times a month, and depending on the complexity of your product, this might take you anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to set up for them and give them the information that they need. Also, on top of that, you can put your context switching. You know, someone's knocking on the door, they're sending you a Slack message, hey, I need help with this. And of course, you want to be there for your team. So you go and you help them, and then you have to go back to the thing that you were doing and get back into that mindset. Really, we're probably looking at something like 2 or 3 hours a month in this one single tiny scenario where we are helping our team, but it is actually taking up quite a lot of time. The whole picture approach is way better, because if we're taking our standards and our expectations and putting them in a centralized area where everybody can access them, so that's looking at the whole system, you will find that these requests come into you much less frequently. Suddenly you have another 2 or 3 hours back in your month. Now, one thing when we're talking about, this one thing gives me 2 or 3 hours, that doesn't really seem like very much. That's true. But imagine applying this principle over and over again, and suddenly you actually have the time that you need to build your business, go out and do your networking, find new opportunities, and actually grow and scale as the leader in your business, as opposed to putting out fires and doing the rescues all the time. Really, what happens here is the habit. The habit is what matters. Before you fix anything, these smaller things that are coming in, think about what is this connected to, and how can you make this fix a part of a larger system so that it depends less on you and your team is able to take much better ownership. Because really what happens is if you keep going to the mechanic, they're only ever going to look at that one thing and sell you that one part. In this case, you're the mechanic. So we want to look at the whole car or your whole system, not just a little bits and pieces. When you start seeing your business as this whole connected thing, you're going to stop treating every problem as a fire you personally have to put out, which is something I know you want to stop doing. And then your job becomes designing the business instead of doing the work inside the business. And yes, you will still be tired at the end of the day, but it's like this really great, satisfying kind of tired. You're like, yeah, look at how much progress I made instead of, gosh, I sure did put out a lot of fires today. So let's talk about you. So this is our you circle. What we want to be looking at here is we want to talk about which one of these areas is maybe putting a little bit more pressure on you and how can we decide to kind of marry things together. What we want to look at for you is time. So we're thinking about where does your attention actually go? If your calendar is full of other people's work, then there's no time for you to do that deep thinking, deep work to start scaling and building your business the way that you want to. Another really important piece here is mindset. What do you believe your job is? As business owners, we often, I think, have a specific mindset of what we think we need to be or what we are supposed to be. And then we get frustrated when we can't get to that point. And that's where we start thinking about, okay, what is my job really? Like, do I need to write that down? And I think the other piece of this too is rating your value on your output, because sometimes it feels like it's really valuable for us to put out the fires and be the rescue person or do the client work. But in reality, your value is much better suited to building that business. And change. I love change. I think it's such an important thing. For some people, it's big and scary. For some people, it's like thrive on this. The important thing though is finding some balance. So how are you introducing and holding change within your systems, within your team? Are you doing things like announcing new initiatives and then they quietly fade away? Are you doing things like really gung-ho and then, you decide something else a little bit later? So you really want to be watching that change and how you're managing it within your whole entire leadership ecosystem. And stress too. So what happens to your judgment when things are feeling really chaotic or really busy? Do your decisions get faster or worse? Are you taking work back instead of taking the opportunity to do coaching and that sort of thing? A lot of the business owners I talk to hold on to things because it feels a little bit less stressful. There's a little bit more control. But in reality, what we're doing is when we're kind of holding these things, we're not providing the opportunity to create capacity through training and through building proper systems by taking the time instead of being very reactive, changing decisions and things like that too quickly. So the stress is one that's, I think, really extra important. It really does set a ceiling in your business, how you are dealing with that and how you're reacting to it. So you kind of hold on to things and you keep doing them instead of allowing the systems and the team to take over those for you, because it feels maybe a little bit safer to hold on to those things. But reality, you're just kind of holding everything back for time. So if you're looking at the you circle and you're thinking, okay, is this me? You can ask yourself, this is kind of a diagnostic question. In the last month, how many times did you take work back that you already handed off to the team? That's just one diagnostic question. There are probably multiple of them, and you could probably even come up with your own as we went through this list. But thinking about what are you actually taking back? That's a really great starting point. Our next circle is team. We're thinking here about how much can your people handle on their own. And we have 5 elements here to consider. First of all is guide. Do people get direction or do they get instruction? So direction is letting them make some decisions on their own. Yes, you can communicate your expectations and, the decisions, how you want them to make decisions, or is it just all inside your head and in your inbox? I have heard that lots where owners are like, well, I didn't take the time to write down the things and give the things to the team that they needed. And so of course, everything was going back and that owner had to manage a lot of things because it felt too complex to centralize the information. But in reality, when you have a system to do that, you are going to free up so much of your time. So that gets us into the sharing. Is the information distributed? Where does it actually sit? Because if people know where it is and can access it consistently, I guarantee you will find multiple hours of time in your day and your week. And engagement. So are people involved in decisions early enough to own the outcome? I think this is a really important piece. Really gets into some fundamentals like sharing your why, explaining what your standards are and what your expectations are, and so that people can actually meet those. And when you engage your team early enough in that process, you can get their feedback too, and ownership just really escalates, and you will find that more ownership and more trust is built, really pays off in the long run. And then we have responsibility. So this is clarity around who's deciding things, making sure that people are clear on that, because if you give them a runway to make decisions, they will. And then if you have thresholds where you're like, well, I want you to check in with me on XYZ, or yes, this is yours, you can completely own it. And this is something that evolves over time. A lot of different factors here. How complex is the task? How much risk is associated with it? How experienced is your team member? So these are all things to consider when you're working on the responsibility piece. And then vulnerability. So how easy is it for somebody on your team, or even for you, to say, I don't know, or this isn't working? Really important to be able to have those conversations so that everybody can learn and grow together and set those standards together if they're not very clear. Obviously, you're leading that process, but as you go along and you're teaching your team this, you will find that they will come back to you and set standards as well, which is great because that is something else you can take off your plate as your team becomes more mature. I personally think that decision ownership is one that is really, really important. If we're delegating tasks but keeping the decisions, you will find that things are coming back to you because people just won't be sure, and they want to make sure that you are being supported in your business, because it's, everybody's livelihood is there. And I find that teams do want to perform and do a great job, but when they're kind of held back by not being able to make decisions or have ownership, that's where some of the frustration can happen on both sides. So here's an example where we're looking at like task delegation. So you're just like, here's a task, please put together the client onboarding doc. So that's just very straightforward. It's like, hey, here, just please do this thing. Whereas if you're looking at providing some decision ownership, this goes something more along like, hey, you are now the owner of client onboarding, decide the format, set the standard, and tell me about it. Now, depending again on how mature your team is, you might want to check in before things go live. You might want to have updates and that sort of thing, and that is completely fine. Eventually what happens is as you go along with this process, you will find that the team members can get further and further along before it comes back to you for any sort of approval or implementation. Basically, it's human automated at that point, where you are trusting that the work is getting done the way that you want it to. The team is owning it and loving it. Everyone loves to own things, but truly own them. Not something where you're like, here, take it back, and here you go and take it back, that sort of thing. The diagnostic question for the team is, can you name 3 decisions that your team can make without you? If you can't even get to 3, there's probably a constraint there. So something for you to consider when we're looking at team. And of course, we have our third circle, which is systems. This is how the business essentially, like, it's an internal brain. It remembers how to do things, and it sets, keeps those standards, knowledge and automation. So really, we're looking at standards as that quality bar. What are those expectations? Are they written down? And what level of outcome are we doing here? This, I feel, can be quite an evolution. So it might be in the beginning that you have a bit of a closer hold on those standards as you are teaching your team how you think. Over time, you will find that spectrum will shift over to the team owning more of those standards and developing them, because they will understand what your thresholds are when it comes to those standards and quality of delivery. Knowledge as well, mentioned it before, but where is the information? Is it central? Is it in a place where people can access it? Do they know how to get there? Is it consistent? This is super important because, like I say, a lot of times the information doesn't get to where it should be going because there's no system to put it there. The problem with that is then you do have people chasing information all over the place, especially in a service-based business where, it's like, where's the file? Where's the numbers? Where's this document? Where's the proposal? Where's all of these things? We should not be asking those questions. There should be well-documented systems and repositories where these things live. It should be very easy for people to find them. When it is, multiple hours of time suddenly free up and become available, because nobody wants to spend 30 minutes trying to find a client proposal. That just doesn't make any sense. So we're front loading, building the system so that it's very easy for people to find this information. My personal favorite is automation. So what's running without everyone thinking about it, including some simple stuff like reminders, templates, those sorts of things. And I think there is kind of a bonus fourth one on here. I didn't put it on here, but I think it is worth thinking about, and that is AI. How is it being used in your business to help it run smoother? Is it a tool or a crutch? And are you using it properly and ethically in a way that actually augments the business as opposed to being something very new and shiny? I'll actually be doing more about AI and leadership and systems in the future. For now, though, we left it off this list just to keep things a bit more analog, because it's important that we understand how those things work before we start getting into some crazy AI and automation, which I'm going to talk about right now. Lots of times we jump straight to the automation. It's cool, it's shiny. We think it's going to solve us or save us a lot of time, feels like progress, but automating a process that people don't understand or agree on is a bad danger. It just makes things a lot more confusing. Chances are you or somebody on your team will not be able to answer why something is like that, which is why we never want to start with automation. We want to set some standards. We want to understand what those standards are. We want to know where that knowledge is, where are we getting it from, where is it going. Once we see that those things are working in a more manual way, then we can start getting into automation, because people understand how it works and you already know it's going to work. You just have this extra thing taking care of that for you. If you try to start with automation, it probably is not going to work for all of the reasons I just stated. So a reflection question or diagnostic question here when it comes to the systems: if your most experienced person left in 2 weeks, yes, that could be you, how much of what they know would leave with them? This is a very important question to really put a lot of consideration in. There might be multiple people who would take knowledge with them, and it might be troublesome for you and your business. Really important to acknowledge that if there are people who have knowledge, that if they left, that would be a problem. You need to start extracting that, building the standards, building the knowledge base, and then after that, start getting into the automation piece. Basically, you should be able to show anybody where to get this information, and in a real pinch, they should be able to take over a job, generally speaking, and be able to work on that for you. So if we're getting back to our beautiful drawing, we are going to talk about these connection lines now. I'm actually just going to start this over again because that's looking a little messy. So let's redraw this, kind of a nice exercise so we can remember what all of these things are. So of course we had at the top is you as the business owner / leader. We have our systems and we have our team, and then we have all of our arrows, our connections are going both ways. So these are all interconnected to one another. The line between you and your systems. So when it is strong, you will find that your judgment, your standards, your expectations are so much more available to the team to access. And what happens when we're looking at the you and the system is we get scale. We are in a much better position to lean into scalability. Now, if you're thinking about you plus your systems, you're building that capacity, you're building that scalability in your small firm. What does it look like when this is broken? If you have documented processes, but you're continually overriding them, or maybe there's always like some exceptions to the rules that are in the systems, which does take away a lot of time. If things are still running on your memory, so maybe not everything got into those systems, that's really setting the pace for everyone else. So if we're looking to strengthen this, what we can be doing is taking a decision that you make repeatedly and turn that into a rule that other people can apply. It's a great exercise to start getting used to building these things, understanding how it works, understanding how the team will use it, because that, of course, is the other most important piece. So you can start with something very simple like that and then start repeating that process over and over again. The other way of knowing that things are getting stronger is when things get busy or things get stressful, the system's holding, people are still using it. There's still not a lot of questions coming to you. You're still not having to put out fires. That is showing that connection is very, very strong between you and systems. And then thirdly, when you stop being the escalation path. So you will find as this gets stronger and stronger, the lower level issues will be handled by the team, and that bar will start raising and raising and raising. There, of course, will be a threshold because there's always going to be some kind of outlier at some point, but at least you'll know and the team will know where that threshold is, which makes it much easier for them to make decisions and you to trust that the work is still meeting your standards, which is very, very important. Every repeated decision that you make that becomes a rule can save you a ton of time. You will absolutely find some time back for you when you start building this out. I would say hours and hours, depending on where you're starting from. And of course, then we're looking at great things like profitability goes up, efficiency goes up, and the client experience is still protected, which is another very important piece of this. So really, you plus systems is how your judgment, your standards, and your expectations kind of survive even in your absence, which is, of course, something we all want. So you plus systems is scale. So if we're looking now at you and your team, this right here is your culture. We all want a good culture in our business. We all understand why it's important. And if you don't understand why it's important, then you probably really want to listen to this part. This is now the line between you and your people, and culture is what your team has learned to expect from you. And they learned it by watching how you behave when things get difficult. They're also building their own culture. So we want to be looking at how can we build this trust? How can we make sure that we are doing the best thing that we can for our team? When we think things are maybe being a problem, so when we're looking at what makes culture really concrete, thinking about things like what happens when someone brings you bad news, and that can determine whether they bring it to you next time or not. So how you're responding to that and how you're supporting them. What you tolerate also becomes a standard. So if we're looking at like favoritism, making a lot of decisions that are different or that they change all the time, or maybe, you're stepping outside of what the written version says, that sort of thing. What you tolerate is important here because that again creates some of that trust on the team. Make sure that people have a good understanding of how you expect things to run. And then of course, what you're interrupting to fix personally, that lots of times tells people where real authority and decision making sits. Not to say that you should be letting things go, because of course you should not be doing that. You still need to keep an eye on things and make sure they're running the way that you want them to. But if somebody's working on a project and suddenly you come swooping in and you're looking over their shoulder and you're making corrections and you're telling them to do it this way or that way without them even getting a chance to finish it or, talk to you about some of the things that they're doing, that becomes a problem as well. So you really want to watch for all of these things and make sure that they're being very tempered. The other part here that I personally really appreciate is that values really step into this piece as well. Values are excellent decision filters. They really are important when it comes to how you are running the business and how your people can help you run the business as well. If your values don't help you settle decisions like speed or quality for a client project, or if they don't help you actually decide between like a client's request and your team's capacity, which way to go there, then they're just kind of words on a wall, and you really do want to be careful with that. You are able to use your values to do good decision making and help the team understand what those standards are within those values so they can help you make good decisions as well. So something that you can do is name your top value. So let's say that your top value within your business is, I'm just going to make something up here. Maybe it's connection, and you can write that down. And then you can say like, okay, what are 3 or 5 of my last decisions that were made? How can I determine how that value of connection came into those 3 or 5 decisions or whatever it might be? So those can be internal decisions, external decisions. Use your own value, of course. Maybe your value is integrity. Maybe it's quality, whatever it might be. Make a list and actually determine whether that value influenced those decisions or not. You might get a surprise in there. In High Return Leadership, I do have a values-based leadership workshop that would be great if you're kind of wondering like, oh, I'd like to know more about this. Go check it out. It's in the classroom there. So this is the one that returns headspace before it returns hours. So when people can predict how you'll respond, they will stop pre-checking with you, which is really nice because that gives you some time back in your day. Your consistency when you're dealing with your team becomes absolutely vital because that's what's going to build that trust. And over time, you will again see that threshold for decision making and standards keeping raise higher and higher because you're consistent in how you're delivering that message. And then your team can be consistent in understanding how to translate that into the work and protect the business and the client experience while building trust within themselves and you, which just makes a happier workplace. I could go on about it forever, but you can see that there's some underlying complexities that become very, very important. So something you can do is take your top value in your company. Let's say it's something like integrity or quality or whatever it might be. Make a list of the last 3 to 5 decisions you made internally, externally, it doesn't matter. And then look at that value and connect it to the decision that you made. Was that value something you used to help determine a decision that you made in those moments? This is a great way to use values as a decision-making matrix and see like, am I following along with the values I want to? The nice thing about this is when you're very consistent and you even talk about this with your team then begins to understand how to make better decisions based on those values as well. It's a win-win situation. It builds a lot of trust, a lot of consistency, and it allows you to know that the team is acting on your behalf in the way that you would hope them to do. When people predict how you are going to respond to things, that builds a lot of trust in the team, and it really does allow you to raise that bar and have the team handling a lot more for you, which gets you a ton more time, which of course is something that we're working on for you. You and your team really does become, shows your intent, and that becomes their behavior. So the more you can model your own values and your own standards and your expectations, while also providing the opportunity to grow in the ownership space, then you will build a team that is more ready and willing to do the best job that they can to your standards. It is like a magic bullet. And last but not least, we have our systems and our team. So what this brings is clarity. This is a really beautiful connection because it really does kind of run without you in it. And you know that when you've done a good job in both of these areas, the systems plus the team really comes together so beautifully and is the culmination of what we've been talking about in this whole business. So your team and your systems, they talk to each other directly. And what becomes of that is this clarity piece where everybody knows. So the system isn't alive necessarily, but it still has knowledge and provides what it needs to so the team can do the work to your standards. This is where some of that magic happens. When it's broken, you can see things like a couple people doing the same job, but they're doing it differently, but no one really knows which way is right. And maybe they're not being done exactly to how you would like it to be. Maybe the standards or the process is there, but what you're finding is the team is kind of working around it because maybe it's clunky or it's not clear or whatever it might be. That's something you can watch for as well. Another thing to watch for here when we're looking at the systems and the team is where is work stalling in the handoff because nobody's sure who picks it up or what the next step is. That can be a great sign that maybe there's something that needs to be tweaked within the teams and the systems as well. All of these arrows go both ways and all of these connections. This one in particular, the systems are telling the team what the standard is. The team tells you when the system is no longer working or maybe it isn't fitting the work. And by the way, they are going to know this a lot better than you are because they are in this work day to day. You are not. You should not know every single thing that every single team member is doing because if you do, that does not give you time to do the work you need to do. So that's why building the trust becomes very, very important to be able to let them do their work and let them be able to report back to you when something needs to be changed or updated. Another one is a system your team can't change. The last one is when the team can tell you then when the system no longer fits the work. So this is a really important piece too, is back and forth communication needs to happen again, because they have the most knowledge about how the work is getting done and even changes in things like technology, how clients are responding. Maybe they have ideas for making more efficiencies. So this is where if there's a lot of ownership between these two, it becomes very powerful and you'll find that they will come to you with suggestions and ways to improve things in the business. Again, saving you some more time and increasing your profitability. So the time return in this area, if you have built your systems and your team very well, this is where you're going to find the biggest return on your time because a lot of those interruptions, the handoff questions, the questions about quality, consistency, and the standards, they're gone at this point because they understand now these two things are interacting with one another in a way that is very consistent and very powerful. I would say that whatever friction you might be feeling in your business right now, it absolutely can be found in one of these three connections. So this is where we're looking at that scale, that culture, and that clarity. How can we look at these connections and say like, okay, what is really the systemic issue here and how can we solve that problem. And I think what happens, is like I said before, we've hired somebody, maybe it didn't work out, the work didn't get any less. We installed all of that new software, we did all those fancy new things, and yet we're still having this friction. It's simply because we didn't look at this whole entire system and actually think about where is the alignment off and where can I actually make some systemic change that is going to improve the business. This is where the time is, no question. And it will give you back the time if you are able to do some work in this area. Looking at the whole thing. So we have our three parts, you, your team, and your systems. You have our three connections, culture, clarity, and scale. This is the useful part. If you don't fix all at once. So that is just simply not possible. There's always going to be tweaks to be made in the business. That's just the nature of being a business owner, kind of part of the fun, in my opinion. What you do want to do, though, is take a look at the weakest connection and see where some tweaks and fixes are. For example, if you are the escalation path for decisions that already have answers, you probably want to look at you plus your system. And then you can maybe turn one repeated decision into a written rule. Start really simply like that. If people are behaving differently while you're in the room, there's a weakness between you and your team. You want to name the trade-off your top value is meant to resolve as one way to solve this issue, and make sure that you're communicating that with your team so that you can now come together in a way that is much more cohesive. It's not you against your team, especially at your size. You cannot afford to have that happening in your business. It must be everybody working together to make sure that we're meeting those standards and getting into the systems piece. If it's true that work is stalling at handoffs and maybe your standards are varying per person, you want to look at your team and your systems. And you can start with something simple like writing a standard for one recurring deliverable, test that out, see how it goes. Now, when you get more sophisticated with this, and this is what I actually help people do, teaching the team how to do this work is very valuable, because then you basically create a meta system where your team is actually doing these improvements as you're going on, taking even more time off of your plate to be able to do the things that you need to do to build your business. All right, let's take this drawing off, my beautiful art here. Knowing the system, it's really understanding this whole ecosystem is kind of the easy part, but designing it for your business and holding the change past like that 6-week mark is where the work really comes in, and digging into each of these connections and seeing like, okay, what can I improve here and there to begin systemically and foundationally building systems and a team and your own leadership in a way that becomes massively scalable over time is really what the key is. So if you're interested in more of this, please, I'm inviting you to join my leadership community on School High Return Leadership. It is totally free and it always will be. It's where owners for small B2B businesses, we build this out piece by piece. I build based on what you ask for with the tools, templates. I also have one-on-one calls with me every second Thursday where I will actually help you and talk about your business directly with you. No strings attached. I just really love helping people. The link is in the description. Hope to see you there. And what you really want to be doing here is getting the alignment, replacing the parts, designing these connections well, and then your involvement becomes something that you choose instead of something that you are putting out fires. We're going to clear up your inbox. We're going to get those questions answered through the team in the system. You will have more time to build the business. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.